Today is April 29th, 2023, and that means that the year 2008 was 15 years ago. On April 29th, 2008, among other things like the European Union signing a stabilization agreement with Serbia and the passing of Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, the highly anticipated Grand Theft Auto 4 was finally released. This game is part of what made my summer break so awesome that year. On days when I wasn't having fun outside, or when I was at home and shows about police chases weren't on that day, GTA 4 was my next favorite thing. I really took my time with the story too. I think it was around July when I finally finished it. I'm glad I nursed it though, because from the moment it was revealed up until its release, I was friggin' hyped. Let me tell you, if you aren't old enough to remember it, or if you are old enough and you just don't remember it, this was a really exciting time in gaming. Ever since the first trailer was shown in March of 2007, fans of the franchise were excited about the game. Imagine having a game looking like this, and then knowing that the next one is going to look like this. To start things off, people were really amazed by how realistic everything looked, and I was too. There was no comparison between San Andreas and this. It looked so much better, from the lighting to the little details, and everything even looked more real. The people looked more real, the cars looked like actual cars and not toy cars. The city might as well have been photorealistic to us back in 2007, especially with what most open world games at the time looked like. Visually, it blew everything else out of the water. With the look alone, I think everyone knew this game was going to be a huge jump into the next generation. Besides the new graphics, you also had the new Euphoria physics developed by Natural Motion, where instead of using pre-made animations, the player and NPCs could flop around realistically and react realistically to getting injured depending on where they were hit. It could range from anywhere between disturbing and freaking hilarious. And no other game had anything like this. It was a lot better than Havok physics, that's for sure. And you know what the real kicker is? Games that are coming out today still cannot match what GTA 4 had back then in terms of physics. Even the big-budget AAA games made by major studios. Look at what crashing a motorcycle in GTA 4 looks like versus how it looks in Watch Dogs 2. It's no comparison. And to think, back in 2008, I'd assumed that this was going to set the standard. Instead, other studios still cannot match what Rockstar could do back then. Euphoria itself has been integrated into the source code of Rage, which is Rockstar's proprietary engine that they've been building their games in since table tennis. And with Natural Motion no longer licensing out their product to other studios, and with how last year their parent company was bought out by Take-Two Interactive, Euphoria, as it was seen in GTA 4, was the start of Rockstar's games now using really good ragdoll physics. Ones that make other games look really cheap in comparison when stuff happens like getting hit by a car, or even just falling off a building. And that's just one example of this game spoiling us. GTA 4 also ruined driving in other games for me when I was younger. It was actually hard for me to play Saints Row or GTA San Andreas after I played GTA 4. Although it was challenging trying to learn how to drive after years of being used to the more arcadey driving in previous GTAs, but you could get the hang of it in no time. Every vehicle handled differently too. I know not everybody was a fan of the new vehicle physics, but there was a learning curve to them. To me, it was fun. To others, not so much, but to each their own. The story is where we also saw a major change in the franchise. At the time, it was the most serious game we had gotten out of Rockstar. If you jumped from any of the previous Grand Theft Autos to this, you would instantly recognize how much darker this game is at times. Now that's not to say it's Scorsese. It can be a bit melodramatic sometimes, and there are still moments that are completely not serious in the least bit, but it felt like Rockstar wanted a more mature story this time around. Something that was a little less crazy than what we got in the 3D era, although it did feel like they were testing the waters with this a bit in Vice City Stories. That game had some really insane stuff going on too, but then it also had some surprisingly dark moments. Then GTA 4 came out 2 years after, and it didn't give us the rags to riches story that we got used to having in these games. There's no building up a criminal empire, there's no taking over the city, and there's no getting to own 3 mansions and 5 penthouses all at the same time. You never get a mansion. You don't build up an empire. You can steal an expensive looking car, but you're not buying it. That is the name of the game, after all. And then the most expensive places that you can get are either owned by your cousin because he got lucky while gambling, or given to you because the previous owner was a gangster who died. And I guess house title transfers in the world of Grand Theft Auto are just super easy to do. But even then, for high-end places that in real life in Manhattan would be worth millions of dollars, they're not comparable to the really flashy and huge places you can own in Vice City and San Andreas. The fruits of Niko's labor do not allow him to buy a 20-bedroom mansion. And that's part of the big difference I think a lot of people just did not like about the game. It's like you were perpetually broke, and not much was offered for you to spend money on. Even once you start to get more money, it's weird that you can carry around millions of dollars in your pocket and never buy anything nicer than an expensive suit and a hot dog that hopefully has ketchup and relish on it. I guess they never wanted you to feel like your actions were a positive thing, though. Niko is a great character, but he is a hired killer, too. He's sarcastic, he can be very nice to people, but at the end of the day, he's still a murderer. And his backstory as a young soldier during the Yugoslav wars in the 90s and the atrocities he witnessed basically hardened him and ruined him as a person, and this is why he is the way he is by 2008. Sure, he can hang out with friends and crack jokes, but he's also willing to be a hired gun in return for money. Through Niko's background, they at least managed to also explain better how you have a protagonist who's skilled in using military-grade weapons and piloting choppers, and who is seemingly okay with his main source of income being something that would typically attract the worst kinds of sociopaths, rather than high-functioning sociopaths like himself who still have strong feelings for people who are close to him. Anyway, now that I've talked enough about the game's background, why don't I get into what I personally like about it? I'll start with reiterating that I enjoyed the driving. Yeah, that's right. I liked it, and a lot of people didn't. But that is my opinion, of course. Hey, when I first played this back in 2008, I thought it was hard to get used to as well. If you wanted to drift around corners like you were in a movie, you had to learn how to do it properly. Cars wouldn't just do it on their own. I really wish GTA 5 had continued with this, but I think after so many people complained, they decided to do a 180 and turn it into something like a racing game. It's certainly not bad physics in GTA 5, it's just that it's easier to pick up and go. It was basically tailored more towards a casual audience, I think. What's also amazing is the dynamic vehicle damage system. Until I played BeamNG Drive, this was the best vehicle destruction I've seen in a game. Cars will dent and crumple according to the point of impact. Now, it's not necessarily exactly like BeamNG Drive. Bumpers and fenders don't come off the car, and it's impossible to do things like destroy the engine by completely flattening it. But for an open-world game, it still looks great, especially one from 15 years ago. GTA 5's vehicle damage doesn't even look as good, and I hope that the vehicle damage in GTA 6 is more like it is in the game with the opposite Roman numerals. Another thing I mentioned earlier that I'll bring up again, the ragdoll physics. Grand Theft Auto 4, like most other Rockstar titles that have been out since then, beautifully utilize Euphoria. We're probably not going to see better ragdoll physics for a long time out of games by other studios. They still use either canned animations or ragdolls that flop around and then just freeze in midair. It's kind of a shame, but Take-Two technically own Natural Motion now, for the one Rockstar title that now comes out every 5 to 10 years, I guess. Moving on from technical things, the story was memorable as well. Rockstar's attempt at doing something a little bit more serious with the franchise was really good, and once again, I wish they could have kept things this way for Grand Theft Auto. Look at Red Dead Redemption and how beloved the plot and characters are. I think GTA should be something like this too. GTA 4 certainly felt like a start to it, but then GTA 5 became more like a Michael Bay movie. And once again, it's not bad, it's just not my favorite. But that's not to say that GTA 4's story is completely perfect. It's really good, but it also has flaws too. The cutscenes and dialogue all tell a really good story, but the problem is that too many missions revolve around driving to a location, getting into a shootout, and then eliminating a specific target, which then completes the mission. I'm sorry, didn't I say I was going to talk about things that I like about the game and not criticism? I mean, it's certainly open to criticism, but let's end this with one more thing that I think was actually really well done. The map. This was one of the most detailed urban open-world maps in any game back in 2008. And like with the physics, there are some things that feel like they were still done better back then than they were today. It might be the amount of NPC actions that you see. People don't just aimlessly walk around. They'll smoke, listen to music, read a book, preach on a street corner, do Tai Chi, interact with other NPCs doing a variety of things. All the things that help make the city feel a little bit more alive. It makes it feel like you're not the only unique person there. And might I add, their rendition of New York, while being a very small and compact version of New York, was very well done. The city felt a lot bigger than it actually is, and it didn't feel like a lot of places reused models or textures. Once you played enough and got familiar with the map, you can tell when you were in a different part of the city without needing the radar to navigate. Sure, 99% of the map is all urban, but every area feels distinct. Outlook is going to feel different from Meadow Hills, which is going to feel different from Suffolk, which is going to feel different from Northwood. Just like in real life, the city doesn't look exactly the same everywhere you go. Each neighborhood has a different feel to it. It's just a shame that the game has been pretty much overshadowed by the one that came after it. But in the past few years, I have noticed more articles from gaming sites that look back fondly on the game. And a lot of people seem to be getting nostalgic for it now, so it hasn't been forgotten. It's just underrated, and it took a while for people to remember how good it was. For its time, I think Grand Theft Auto 4 was a great game, and it still is. And that's not to say the game isn't rough around the edges at times. The controls can feel a little clunky now. The driving was fun, but it's not perfect. And I still think the map could have used at least a little countryside. And I still fully believe that Staten Island could have served that purpose. I don't care if they think it's boring or not. It has a lot of parks. It has a wooded area. It would have felt like countryside that everybody was begging for. But that's neither here nor there. You have to really admit that one thing the game nailed was its setting and atmosphere. You're playing as a stranger in a strange land. And in the first part of the game, when it's just you and Hove Beach, no friends besides your cousin Roman, surrounded by a million jerks and weirdos, and you're completely unfamiliar with the territory of the city, it's an easy game to get lost in. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It's also super easy to screw around too, and I love the dichotomy of that. Sometimes I think unintentional hilarity is even better than the stuff that's supposed to be funny, and this can happen a lot in this game, the swing set glitch being the prime example. I mean, just look at this. How beautiful is that? I guess it says something though when even the glitches were memorable. Anywho, what do you think of Grand Theft Auto 4? Tell me what you liked about the game, and what you maybe didn't like about the game. You're allowed to be critical. What are your memories of playing this game for the first time? And can you believe that 2008 was 15 years ago? The world will keep on turning, and thankfully we will still have this awesome game to play. Let me know what your thoughts are, and thank you for watching.
That's the spirit.